I didn't choose the scrunchy life. The scrunchy life chose me. Welcome back to Chronically Musical. My name is Alice, and this channel is a place where I share videos about my life as a professional classical violist, as well as my experiences as a person living with 2 autoimmune diseases. If you're new here and one or both of those topics sound interesting to you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell while you're at it. I release videos every Wednesday and very occasionally put something out extra during the week, and you don't want to miss those. Now let me give you all a little bit of context for today's video, because if you couldn't tell by the title, we are really gonna get into it today. Now, I started playing the violin when I was 8 years old, and when I turned 13, I switched to viola. I then decided to go to a public arts high school here in Los Angeles, and then eventually decided to pursue a bachelor's and a master's degree in music. I received my bachelor's of music degree in 2016 from UT Austin, and in 2018, I graduated with a master's degree from Juilliard in the same field. Now, all of this is just to say that I have spent the better part of 19 years engrossed in the classical music world and culture. And though I hardly consider myself to be an expert in this field, I will say I think I've been a part of it long enough to have an opinion on it. And on the goings-ons. Goings-on? What is that phrase? My point is, classical music has been a part of my life longer than it hasn't been, and I have a lot of thoughts on a lot of aspects of it. So let's go ahead and just address the elephant in the room. I mean, how cute is the scrunchie? Am I right or am I right? All right, so let's talk about the other elephant in the room, what I consider to be one of the most common and least talked about aspects of being a classical musician, the guilt factor. I mean, honestly, it's kind of a prerequisite to feel guilty before you officially become a classical musician. Here's your first violin, little child, and some rosin and a side of guilt, and good luck! Happy practicing! I'm in a mood today, let me tell you. Okay. Now, this guilt can come from many places. It can be self-imposed, it can come from a parent, it can come from a teacher, or it can even come from your peers, friends, and colleagues. Regardless of where this guilt comes from, I think I can say one thing for certain. If you are a classical musician, at one point or another in your classical music career, you have felt guilt or guilty about something. Of course, we don't all feel guilty in the same ways, so I'm just gonna speak to my personal experiences on this topic, but I really would love to know if you've had similar feelings before, so definitely leave a comment below. So what do I feel guilty about? Well, my experiences with guilt seem to be all centered around one very specific aspect of being a classical musician. Arguably one of the most important aspects of being a classical musician: practicing. Feeling guilty about practicing, or for not practicing for that matter, has followed me around for my entire classical music career. And the crazy thing is, I still feel it. During this whole pandemic, for example, I've spent very little time with my instrument. Now, that's not to say I haven't done a lot of really cool virtual projects and at-home recordings, but I really haven't practiced very much in the last year. There have been several points where I've taken weeks off from practicing my instrument. To be honest, there have been several points where I've taken months off. And that's really hard for me to admit right now. I actually didn't even have that written out in my script. But it's true. And some of these breaks were by choice. I was feeling burnt out and I needed to step back and take some time away from my instrument and focus my energy elsewhere. And some of these breaks were not by choice. Some of them were because I was in an IBD flare-up for most of the fall last year, and to be honest, could barely get out of my pajamas, let alone take my instrument out and play Kreutzer etudes. I've spent the least amount of time with my viola in my hand than I probably have since I was 13. I know this just got really serious really fast, but this topic is something that I know I'm not alone in feeling, and it's never talked about. Even if I spend an entire day checking everything off my to-do list, accomplishing things, being productive, getting shit done, I still don't feel like I've accomplished anything if I haven't taken my viola out. I think part of this comes from having a career that is also a passion. My job is also my hobby, and if I'm not at work or working, i.e. practicing, then what have I even done for the day? And if your hobby is also your job, you should love every aspect of it, right? Including being locked away in a tiny windowless room, critiquing every single tiny little aspect of the sound that comes out of your instrument and crying quietly to yourself in a corner. All right, so that may be slightly overdramatic, but honestly, not really. I mean, I want to say more times than not when I was in college and grad school, I spent hours locked in a windowless room critiquing every sound that came out of my instrument and crying to myself in a corner. That's not that crazy. But what's crazy is that it actually is crazy. I mean, why do we feel this way? Why do we put this on ourselves? Why do we feel guilty if one Sunday a week we don't want to spend 4 hours locked away practicing Hindemith? I'm so passionate about this, I'm hitting things. But seriously, I mean, that is absurd. What other career, what other job in the world demands that kind of dedication and that kind of, I don't know, consumption? When I don't practice every single day, I almost feel like I don't even deserve to be known as a violist. I don't even deserve that title. And that is insane because all I've ever done is this. I mean, really. Again, there were those softball stints in middle school, but sadly, those never amounted to anything. And I never had any other hobbies because my hobby was my job and all I was doing was my hobby and my job. So how could I not feel like I'm still that thing that I've always been and done just because I'm not doing it every day? Man, this is deep. I just got little shivers. I got chills when I said that. Now again, I know that I am not the only classical musician who has felt or feels this way. But for some reason, in the classical music community, we just don't talk about this. We don't talk about the guilt or being motivated by guilt because you're constantly comparing yourself to your peers. If Kevin down the hall has been practicing the same sonata as you for the last 7 hours and you've only been in there for 3, obviously you got to stay for another 4 so you can beat Kevin, but Kevin's going to stay for another 4. I mean, it's just crazy. Also, if there's a violist out there named Kevin, I'm sorry, I don't know you, but I'm sure you're wonderful and keep up the good work. In my experience, these feelings of guilt have been instilled in me since I first started taking violin lessons. From the very beginning of my time studying violin, I was asked how much I practiced that week. Every lesson, it was, how much did you practice? How many hours are you practicing a day? And I would always lie. I would always tack on an extra 30 minutes or an extra hour or whatever. And even then, when I was lying and adding extra time onto my answer, I still didn't feel like that was enough. It never was enough. The really sad part of that is it took me like 15 more years to realize that it isn't actually about how much you practice, but the quality of your practice. That being said, I still feel uncomfortable when I discuss how much I practice because frankly, right now, it's 0. I'm a professional classical musician and I am not practicing right now. And again, I feel so much guilt about that, but I'm doing other things. I'm creating other things. I'm focusing my energy elsewhere for the first time pretty much since I was 8 years old. And I think that's okay. I hope that's okay. I'm telling myself that's okay. All I wanted as a kid was for someone to tell me, if you practice this many hours a day, you will be the best you can possibly be. Unfortunately, there's no formula for that. And again, it really doesn't actually matter how much you practice if the quality of that practice isn't good. And no matter how much I did practice, it almost certainly was never enough, even though there was no magic number that I was trying to reach. So how do we break this habit, this cycle of feeling guilty? Because that's all it is, right? It's just learned behavior. Just like we practice our instruments, we practice feeling guilty. And for me, I practice feeling guilty about practicing. Now, I'm not saying I figured out the guilt factor or how to be rid of it by any means, but what I am saying is I do have a choice to feel these feelings. Just like I have a choice to practice sometimes, I can choose to feel guilty or I can choose not to feel guilty. And I think acknowledging that freedom and the control that I actually have over making that kind of a decision is the first step in getting past it. But I do think this topic needs to be discussed and addressed within the classical music community. I mean, excluding my guilt that I feel over practicing, one of my number one motivating factors for practicing was feeling guilty, was feeling like I would let my teacher down if I didn't achieve certain things or if I didn't sound good enough. I mean, that's not healthy, is it? Having your motivation be driven from a state of fear or guilt isn't the way we want to accomplish things. I don't know if it produces the best end product. If you are a classical musician, or maybe you're just a person out there who can relate to what I'm talking about and has experienced some elements of feeling guilty or guilt over something, leave a comment below. I know that this was a bit of a heavy and a heady topic and was a little all over the place and rambly, but I hope that there was some value in it, and I do think that this is maybe an opportunity for a larger discussion on some of the things that aren't openly talked about in the classical music world. If you liked this video and you find yourself wanting similar content, or perhaps entirely different content related more towards the chronic illness side of my life, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, tell all your friends, share it everywhere, all of the things. It does mean a lot to me, and it keeps me motivated to continue creating. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you all next week. Bye.